Good afternoon, Mr. Sharma. Good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon, all the iLEADers, our mentors who are present in this session. And I'd like to give special thanks to Mr. Jayanth Sharma for being the special guest in this webinar. We welcome you, Mr. Jayanth Sharma.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To give a brief introduction, Mr. Sharma is a well-renowned wildlife photographer and is currently the co-founder and the CEO of Toehold Travels and Photography. So I wish we'll get a very good exposure in terms of career aspects related to wildlife photography, photography as in general, as well as the basic introduction of wildlife photography. So start with the session. I'd like to introduce Mr. Sabyasachi to Mr. Jayanth Sharma. Mr. Sabyasachi is currently one of our mentor of iLEAD, and he is specialized in photography. So he was very much excited when he heard that you are going to go ahead and give a session to our students. So I welcome you, sir. So you please go ahead and do the moderating. I'll be more than honored for that.
As a moderator, I will not intervene much, but I will just help to bridge between Mr. Sharma and the students. So Mr. Sharma, I would really, before you go in for your presentation, I would really love if you can start off sharing some experiences, since you have been into wildlife photography for such a long period of time. So if we can just start the session with you sharing some of your memorable experiences with our students.
Absolutely.
I think over to you, Mr. Sharma.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen so that it's easy for us to let me know if you can see my screen. Just a second. All right. I'm sure you can see my screen because I'm on my phone watching what we are discussing.
Yeah. It's
well, thank you everybody for coming on time. So my name is Jayanth Sharma. I would love to spend this hour that we have between 3 to 4 sharing some thoughts on wildlife photography, on my journey, quite literally my journey, apart from my journey as a photographer, and show you some of the places where I work. Probably not too many people in India will have that kind of a diversity in locations where they work. So I'm very privileged and humbled to have that kind of an experience. So I'd love to share my stories from across the globe. Just to tell you a little bit about my background, I am actually from a town called Mysore, very close to Bangalore. Currently, I live in Bangalore. I moved to Bangalore about 17 years ago when I started working for an IT company called Accenture, and I spent a few years in multiple IT companies before I quit my job in 2007-8 season, because I had already got a little bit of a progression when it comes to my career in photography. I had already won awards, Sanctuary Asia Wildlife Photographer contest. I had won awards. I was widely published already as an IT employee doing photography as a hobby, and it became quite big. And in 2008, I had I can't say the confidence, I had the audacity to quit my job to try and see if I can do this full time, because I had nobody else who I could ask for career advice. Like today I'm talking to you, I had nobody whom I could go and ask, whether I could make a career out of wildlife photography. So since I was in my mid-20s, I realized I had to try doing what I wanted to. So since then, I started traveling. I started making pictures, stories, contributing to magazines, books, and stuff like that. And I realized very soon in my career of photography that wildlife photography is an interesting field where we'll come to the career part of it in the end. But before that, I realized I wanted to start a company where I don't depend on my skills as a photographer forever. Because when you say you're a photographer, right? If you see somebody who's having 40 years experience in photography, they have to go and do their work, even if they are 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old, only then they make their money. I realized for the kind of field I'm interested in, I want to set up a system where even if I am not out in the field, I'm still involved in the business of economics and money making and trying to see what I can do. And which is why I probably am one of the few photographers who are entrepreneurs as well. So I started a company called Toehold, where we started teaching people photography. And these people are not students like you going to college for 2 years, 3 years. These are people who are doing any kind of a profession. Could be a lawyer, could be an engineer, software engineer, doctor, real estate, housewife, anybody. We started teaching photography to them. We came up with a camera rental business model where people could hire long lenses, expensive full frame cameras, and all of that about 11 years ago. And most important part of my business is I take people out on photography expeditions. And so far, we have been operating in 6 continents on the globe. Somehow, Australia, New Zealand, we haven't really stepped into, but that's probably also because relatively wildlife is lesser there compared to the rest of the planet. I'd love to show you some of my work before we discuss the aspect of career in photography. I don't know what course all of you are doing here. If either Mr. Sabyasachi or Vidyut can give me a quick introduction to what course all these students are undertaking. Is it a Bachelor of Arts? What is it that they are learning in this
Yes,
institute?
yes, Mr. Sharma. So basically,
Okay,
most of the students right now who are present in this webinar, they are undergoing a 3-year undergrad course in media studies. So
I
we
see.
call,
I
yeah,
see.
so we call the course BMS, which is Bachelor of Media Studies. And in
Right.
that 3-year course, they do have photography as one of their subject also. Like in the first
Right.
semester, they have a basics of photography, and then in the third sem, they again have a advanced photography.
Fantastic. I must also mention that I'm a visiting faculty in one of the prestigious institutes, Symbiosis School of Photography as well. I go there to teach many modules as and when time permits. So what happened to me was I came out with skills that were very interesting. A techie with creativity and photography skills also had the knowledge and the skills and the interest to teach. So these were very unique skills that I think I had, because one, I know a lot of photographers who are exceptionally good photographers, but if you go and ask them a question or two, they'll say they can't teach you properly, because they'll say, I do this, I don't know, it comes to me and I do this. They are very good photographers, but not necessarily as good teachers. So I realized, since I had the skill of not just understanding creativity, not just realizing how I can adapt to new technologies. As a kid, I was born in a studio. My father is a photographer, so I used to play hide and seek in a dark room. In the 80s, I used to hide in the dark room and no friend of mine could catch me because nobody would know anything inside the dark room. So I was born and brought up in a creative environment. And by the time I was 20, already digital photography started coming very strong. And I was actually employed in IT when digital cameras came into the world. 2003, 2004, 2005 season, DSLRs were available in the cities. So that's when I latched on to the field of photography, started doing it as a hobby from 2004 to 2007, 8. I traveled a lot on my own money, doing it as a hobby while I was employed in the IT industry on Saturdays, Sundays, and stuff like that. As I said, 2009, 10, while I was freelancing and teaching photography to people, I realized the need for making this a business, because, when I'm 60, I cannot be underwater diving and probably taking a picture like this, because, when you get older and older, it'll show and it'll have an effect on your physical capabilities. And I realized that very early. So I didn't want to depend too much on my own physical abilities. So I developed a system, I developed a company. Whether it'll work well or not in the future is another question. But at the moment, it seemed like a great idea to have a business which will work for you. There are people who are employed by the company, and we are reasonably, at least till COVID hit the world, we were reasonably doing well. Now we are struggling because there's no travel. So what I want to do is make this a little interesting for people, to show you some of the places where I do photography. Before that, I want to tell you a little bit about my philosophy of why I do wildlife photography. So as a kid, guys, I was always into arts. I was always into music. I was always into painting, drawing, dramatics, except being excited about studying in school. I was excited about most other things about school. When I say studying, I would be excited to be in NCC, go to the parade, go to Nausena camp, go to RD camp, and all of that, go to the music competitions, go to art competitions, drama competitions. But I was not as excited as to study, even though I was a 75, 80 percentile student. Um, above average, not a high distinction student, because I was using my time to do a lot more creative stuff. So when I started pondering over, I told you, right, my dad is a photographer. So I was always born and brought up in a photography environment. But somehow I never wanted to do photography just because there was cameras available at home and stuff like that. I was never inspired to do photography. Even today, I tell you from the bottom of my heart, I'm not passionate about photography. I am actually passionate about wildlife. So I realized very early that, hey, because I'm so, I'm madly in love with nature. I can actually use the world of cameras and photography and the medium of expression that cameras bring in through creative expressions using photographs, that I can tell stories better producing images. And why do I need to tell stories? I realized that in the world, wildlife is suffering, right? There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of conservation problems that the world is going on. You have a lot of NGOs which work trying to save wildlife and trying to work on conservation issues and stuff like that. But I think they will not be very successful unless the whole world gets up and gears up to this problem. And how do we inspire the whole world? Like if you go to your uncle and aunt who have never been to a Bandhavgarh National Park or a Jim Corbett or even the Sundarbans, which I suppose is close to you, how will they even get inspired to save wildlife? So I realized the first way to do that is to make them fall in love with it. And how do you make them fall in love with it? By showing them the beauty of it. So a photographer like me plays a very important part in the larger goal of this planet's conservation, wildlife conservation, ecology, environment protection, and all of that, even without using those words and talking about it necessarily. So I will take you through a journey. Before that, I want to just tell you that, I basically used to use a lot of different camera brands in the past. I spent a lot of time using Canons, Nikons, and stuff like that. But since 2020, I'm a Sony brand ambassador. I currently use mirrorless cameras and I use Sony. This is just a fun picture to show you when photography started for me. Back then, it was this pretty girl next door. Right now, she's in New York, but then she became a pretty bird or a wild animal or a tiger and stuff like that. So very early, I caught on to photography. This is a picture of my first award, which happened in 2006. It's an elephant charging me in Kabini. I don't know how many of you know where is Kabini. If you understand a little bit of photography, I was in a boat. I was trying to snap this picture of an elephant, which is at a slightly higher elevation than where I am. And I have used my camera's under exposure compensation to make it a silhouette. I want you guys to remember these words. If you've not already studied about it, go back and look up and figure out how do you shoot a silhouette. So I am actually underexposing this shot to make it a silhouette. And since the elephant is charging me, the judges thought was a very powerful image. I must say this is a life-changing image of mine along with this one. So this picture of mine was shot in 2006, again, my initial years in photography in Bandipur National Park, 2 monitor lizards fighting. So all I needed was one spectacular opportunity like this to break out of my hobby photography and start announcing that I've arrived in this world of wildlife photography. This picture was on the cover of Sanctuary Asia magazine for a guy who is still in IT, employed there as a hobby photographer. Being on the cover of a prestigious magazine was a great start for me. So this was my first published image. So
Mr.
just
Sharma,
to be on background.
Mr.
Yes,
Sharma,
please.
can I just intervene for once?
Yeah,
That
please. Yeah, please.
that elephant image that you showed, what focal lens is this? What lens do you remember? Like
Sure. Of course I do, because this was a
This-
8,000 rupees Nikon 70-300 mm lens, extremely humble equipment. Because you remember I was starting out, I didn't have expensive camera gear back then. It was a 70-300 f4.5 to 5.6 ED Nikon lens. They don't make this lens anymore, but it used to cost 7,000, 8,000 rupees back then. It was quite a simple lens to have. So that brings us to a point where you don't need fancy gear to win awards. You can make some amazing pictures even with humble equipment. Some of our mobile phones cost much more than that today.
Yes, that was the exact point why I wanted you to speak about the lens. That was exactly the point because yes.
Sure. Okay,
Please
I'll keep going
continue.
ahead. I want to show a lot of stuff. All right, so this basically is my footprint on this globe, guys. So this is the kind of places I have been working with. As you can see, it's virtually every corner of the world except a couple of places. I still have to go to Papua New Guinea, to Australia, New Zealand, otherwise a little bit in Siberia, though I have done a lot of work in Kamchatka, in the far east of Russia. I'm very proud of my, when I'm old, 70-year-old Uncle Jay talking to my grandchildren, I can tell them stories every day. One day about polar bears, one day about cheetahs in Africa and stuff like that. So I'm gathering memories of a lifetime by doing all this travel and, watching what I think, is one of the spectacular gifts that this world has had. So, of course, I don't know how many of you have the privilege of seeing an animal like this in the wild. Everybody starts with a tiger. And I must tell you, I was recently in Kolkata. I was in Sundarbans quite a lot between December and March. But this picture is shot in Jim Corbett National Park. Tigers happened to be one of the first few subjects of mine because that was the most exciting for a beginner. This is my exposure in India. These are the places where I have worked. I would love to show you pictures from many of these places so that you get a variety of how different this world is. Because I must admit that if you don't have a passion for wildlife, you would not be a great wildlife photographer. You would, it's very, very obvious that every day, if you have to get up at 5 and go to the field before sunrise, you need to have a passion for that. And sometimes the passion is not about photography at all. It's about, I want to be there in the wilderness. I want to experience the sunrise and hear the peacock calls or the, mist there and stuff like that. So being passionate about your subject is something that definitely gives people an extra edge. Otherwise, people will not really be able to, inspire themselves to do this every day. Look at me, it's been 17, 18 years I'm taking pictures of wildlife. Tomorrow morning, if you allow me to go to Kabini at 5 o'clock, I'll be as excited as I was in 2003. So having passion for the subject is very important. Since I deal with common man and, their interest in wildlife, a lot of my work happens to be big cats. So these are some of the areas in the world where you can find big cats, and I have probably gone to most places. Though I still don't have 1 or 2 big cats. The Siberian tiger and Amur leopard, both are Siberian animals. But otherwise, jaguars, pumas, lions, cheetahs, leopards, tigers, snow leopards, all the other big cats I've had the fortune of witnessing and photographing. This is a picture shot in Madhya Pradesh, Bandhavgarh National Park. I don't know how many of you have been to national parks. When tigers are indulging in mating, after the mating they do have a small quarrel before they part for a few minutes and they meet again for a few more minutes later. So this is basically an eye level shot of the mating tigers. Just because you're photographers, I must tell you, I was sleeping in the Jeep and taking my camera as low as possible to get this almost eye level of the tiger. It's very important to understand the angle of shooting. You should be at the level of the animal as much as possible, unless you're doing things like reflections and stuff like that. So a lot of places in India are great places to photograph tigers. This is a very popular tiger called Krishna from Ranthambore. Ranthambore happens to be one of my favorite tiger parks. And if you look at this, technically speaking, the sun is just rising. She has just come out of the forest and there's not enough light which has reached the interiors of these bushes. So I use, again, a technique where I underexpose the shot so that the light on the tiger is captured, whereas the background gets a lot darkness. So this is something which is going to help me separate the animal from the background. I was going to mention initially that when you say wildlife photography, right, there are 2 kinds of wildlife photographers, at least broadly. One, who are documentary natural history photographers, documentary wildlife photographers. Then there are the others who are like me, who are photographers who consider themselves artistic or creative. So what is the difference between the two? The difference is when you are a documentary photographer, you're not interested as much in the light, in the angle, in the beauty, in the composition, in the aesthetics, and all of that. Your goal is to capture that sight. You want to take a picture of this rare bird which has come from Mongolia to India and take a picture of that and publish it in birding journals or in magazines or newspapers and say, this Mongolian duck has come all the way to India flying across from the Himalayas. Nobody will care whether the photo was composed well or whether there was great light, was it, beautiful backlight or front light, or how was the composition. That becomes secondary there. What becomes important there is whether there's a picture to show this, the proof of sighting, which is what we call a record shot, to show this. Having said that, there are photographers like me, because we are creative by nature. We wouldn't just be happy getting a picture of a tiger. We want a picture of a tiger that is artistic, that is printable, that is presentable. So later when we speak about the career and finance and economics of a photographer, I'll speak about how fine art prints are what is important to me as a photographer. But it's just me. There could be some others who make documents of amazing animals. They see rare animals and they produce pictures, which could be also high quality artistic. But the goal is not to produce artistic images there. The goal would be to document nature and unique species or behavior or stuff like that. So I know that some of you are asking questions. I just saw some question pop up. You can keep on asking questions. I'll not look at it right now because I'll forget the flow and what I want to tell you. We'll find some time later on, hopefully in about 20 minutes, to answer your questions. I want to take you across the world. So I hope you guys are ready for the journey. Tigers are very interesting subjects for me. And again, this is another picture of me using artistry and the science. That's why when I teach photography, I call it the art and science of photography, because the goal is to produce an artistic photograph, not just what an iPhone can click or any other mobile phone can click. You have to produce a picture sometimes that the naked eye is not even seeing. So if you look at this photograph, most novices will say, "Arey, ye to Photoshop kar diya." But if you understand technique, if you understand artistry, when I see the scene of this tiger called Noor, who is walking at 11 o'clock in the hot sun in the jungle, I notice a disparity of light inside the thickets in the jungle. There is a lot of shadows where she's walking. Suddenly there is a beam of light from the trees which is falling. And I actually follow this tiger. In fact, I'm actually leading the tiger. I'm reversing the car while she's walking towards me. And I'm ready with a camera technique, waiting for a situation where a beam of light falls on her face, and I want to capture that. So if you understand cameras, I've used spot metering in this example, and I wait for an opportunity where she stops to listen to some deer, and thankfully, luck favors me, and there's a beam of light falling on the tiger's face. Because I'm on spot metering, I measure the measure the tiger's face, which sets the exposure only on the tiger. And because the exposure on the tiger is measured, which is here, everything else which was not in the same light gets completely underexposed, because the other things apart from where the light is falling was completely not dark in nature, but it was darker than the face of the tiger. So this is what is called a low key image. So I measure the light on the tiger and get this dramatic thing and show it to my participants, and they say, "Kya bol rahe ho? Is this the way it is? It looks like, sab kuch dikh raha hai aankhon mein, and how can you get a black background?" That is by instructing the camera to measure the light in the scene in a particular way, so that you produce something which is not even there in nature. A good creative photographer looks at a scene closing his eyes. When you close your naked eye, you can see perceptions and visions and creativity, which you cannot see when you open your eyes. So creative photographers look at the scene, close their eyes, imagine a possibility, and do some things in the camera. This is not necessarily an easy thing to do. When a tiger is walking towards you, your heart is beating, your mind is anyway not working, you're just clicking away to glory. But then if you've seen 500 tigers over time, then you learn to control your heart and say, hold on, tiger is walking, pata hai mujhe, I know it's exciting. Is there something creative I can do? Is there something I can do that everybody would not do? How is it that my tiger photo of Noor is going to be different from somebody else's who shot it yesterday? When you start thinking like this, you will force yourself to break out of the common, the documentation style of photography to creative nature photography. That's just a thought. Having said that, we do bank a lot on nature speciality, like this tiger called B2 in Bandhavgarh. There's nothing great about my creativity here. It's just an opportunity that I've grabbed, for which also you need some technical skills. It's backlight. You need to understand how the light will make the tiger darker here, and use the camera's technique of exposure compensation, make it a little brighter so that even in backlight, the tiger is captured well. I have a lot of pictures to show, so it might seem like I'm in a hurry because it's just 1 hour, already half an hour is done. So I want to keep going ahead. Unless you have questions, you can put the questions in the chat. I'll answer them in about 19 minutes from now. So some of my photographs will be shot in telephoto lenses because I'm in the wilderness. This is a picture of a leopard in Africa, a 600 millimeter lens. Because of the long lens, you can see how the background has got completely out of focus. That is something which is a feature of optics, which is a feature of something called depth of field. You can make a note of that word if you haven't studied about it already. If you have, this is a great example to show you how long lenses can get you shallow depth of field images. Uh, at the same time, there could be stuff in the background that is important to notice. Not necessarily like this picture where it's out of focus. It's the fields or the savanna in the background. Nothing interesting there. So I'm happy to get an out of focus shot. At the same time, there could be situations sometimes where the background has some element which is interesting. And in this case, this reticulated giraffe was walking towards this leopard, which was, in this small drizzle on this tree, observing what I am doing, while the giraffe didn't even know she was there. And when it came very close to the leopard, it could smell the leopard and it ran away. So if I had used a similar bigger aperture, longer lens, I would have got a very shallow depth of field, making the background out of focus, versus this giraffe is about 10 feet behind the leopard. So I had to increase the depth of field so that I could see a little bit of the background so that it is recognizable. Always remember, in this photo, the hero is the leopard. The giraffe is a side actor. So I don't want the giraffe to supersede the emphasis that the leopard is taking. At the same time, I want the giraffe to be recognized, unlike the background here. So if you see here, far away, if there is something here, you will not even notice, but it's called completely out of focus. Whereas in the leopard and the giraffe shot, you can notice that it's a giraffe because you can clearly see it. So depth of field is an important aspect of photography as well. Then again, composition. So I love to photograph in Africa because it gives you a lot of opportunity to move your car, position yourself, keep the leopard on the left or on the right, go behind the back light, go in the front light, go to the side light. It allows you to strategize your compositions. Otherwise, in tiger parks, what happens is you're in one place, tiger is in good light, you get a good shot. Tiger is in bad light, you don't get a good shot. So this is a park in Tanzania called Serengeti, another leopard shot. So some of the leopards that I've shot in Africa, especially in East Africa, are very, very interesting, mostly on trees. They are amazing animals which can also be on the ground at the same time climb trees. Now look at the picture on the right here. It's a perfect example of using exposure compensation to photograph a silhouette. I'm on aperture priority. As a wildlife photographer, 95% of the times I'm on aperture priority. And I use the camera's exposure compensation to underexpose so that it can capture the animal in a silhouette, whereas the clouds are captured, the sky is captured in good light. That's how I could get this silhouette of the leopard while the background is properly exposed. More pictures from Africa. I love the light in Africa because that kind of light is what makes me produce creative images. Otherwise, if the light is harsh, light is boring, that's why when elderly photographers bless young people, they will not say Ayushman Bhava, they'll say may you have good light, because that's the blessing a photographer needs, not a long life. You need a reasonably long life with a lot of good light. So I hope you guys have good light in your life. Look at this backlight. So this is again 15 minutes before sunset. The sun is about a little above the horizon, and that's the time when I click the maximum pictures in the day. Early morning till about 7 o'clock, I have a lot of shots. Then from 5:30 to 6:30 in the evening, I have a lot of shots. In the middle of the day, I'll see if there is an opportunity. Otherwise, I also snooze off under the tree with the lions. I love to shoot silhouettes because they're dramatic. They make creative exposures. And then, of course, I posted this image just a couple of days ago when we had Mother's Day. Animals have all the emotions that human beings can relate to. Very tender moment here. A few weeks old cub, which is not even awake, and the mom is relocating the cub from one den to another. And that was a very, very personal moment of this lioness that I could capture. Anyway, this is the good morning alarm call by lions in the savannah. And again, a silhouette. Look at the composition, how I've not kept the lion in the center, but moved it away because the lion is looking towards the right. And I have a lot of space on the left here because that gives you, it's a rule of third composition. It gives you a little bit of a positive space and a little bit of a negative space, and then beautifully composed. And what's interesting here is those leaves behind the lioness as well, which adds to the contrast in this image. Very proud of this technique that I've mastered. This is a technique called the rim light technique. Again, you need to close your eyes and imagine the shot. If you open your eyes, you'll see the lion. In fact, this is the same lion's shot. This is the same place where I have made this shot. So how do I do that? I use the camera spot metering. I measure the light on the sun. I lock the exposure. If you're an Nikon user, it's called AEL. If you're a Canon user, it's the star button. If you're a Sony user, also it's called AEL. I'm sure Panasonic, Fuji, and all of them also call it AEL. I have locked the exposure on the sun, made sure the background of the shot is the ground. And because if you see here, what's the brightest part of the shot? It's the rim of this animal, right? So I just made use of that bright spot and I measured just that bright spot, because of which everything else became dark. This is something called as a rim light technique, bicycle rim, edges of the subject. Silhouettes are my favorite, and of course, I do bank a lot on natural history. I'll just speed it up a little so that I want to show you different parts of the world. These are just lovely pictures of Africa that I'm showing you currently. I might be rushing here because I want to show you some other interesting places where I work as well. Let me take a break here, and I want to probably see some questions, maybe take a little bit of a break from my presentation and see some questions here. How do you manage or balance the exposure in such low light conditions? Indrakshi, I'm assuming you asked me that question when you saw the tiger, image, right? Can you just say yes or no? The tiger in a black background. Just say a thumbs up if it is yes. On the
Yes,
chat,
sir.
I'm watching the chat. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So Indrakshi, that was not at all a low light situation. That was an extremely harsh light situation. So let me go back to that shot so that we understand what we're talking about. That was a light which was almost 11 o'clock in the morning. The dirtiest possible light, so harsh. So it's not like a night. Just because you see blackness here, don't assume it is darkness. It was a completely bright morning. I actually used, as I said, the spot metering to capture this image. And I made a 11 o'clock morning look like night and the tiger with a torch. That's the specialty of creative envisioning. So somebody is asking, do you geotag your photos? I do if the project needs, but otherwise, why do you ask that? What's the relevance of that question? Let me know if I can answer it in a better way. The tigers of Ranthambore are the ones at Bandhavgarh. So the thing is, somebody sending me a direct message, Shripit Palit. Please put the chat on public so that everybody can see your question. I photograph in both places, and I do geotag it if I go to places like the Arctic, where I cannot find that place again. If you realize, I'll show you pictures of the Arctic very soon. So I wanted to quickly show some pictures of snow leopards. I don't know how many of you have had the fortune of going and watching a snow leopard. This is a snow leopard in Spiti Valley in Himachal Pradesh. In front of me, he killed this ibex, rolled down from a mountain, and he's feeding on it for 3 days. So big cats are a fascination because they are the ones which attract the common man a lot. I love to photograph big cats, and it's taken me to all corners of the globe, as I said. Look at this place. There's a place in South America called the Pantanal. And I go here, which is in the Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay region. I go here to photograph jaguars. Jaguars are like leopards, but they are called the tigers of the rivers. And they basically are only big cats apart from the tiger, which love to stay in water. They swim, they hunt, they do everything around the river. So this is a place called the Pantanal. Jaguars are an interesting animal as well. Anybody has a question, you can say, sir, and I'll stop. All right, so these are jaguar pictures. Amazing, to watch these big cats across the globe. They're very similar looking to leopards, but they are completely different in behavior, habitat, in the way they hunt, in the way they walk, in the way they, everything is different about them. Because in leopard country, in Ranthambore, Bandhavgarh, Kabini, Corbett, and all of these places, leopards live a little bit of a subdued life because they have a bigger cat than them, who is the apex predator, which is the tiger. But here, nobody above the jaguar. Jaguar is the topmost in the food chain. And jaguars hunt crocodiles called caimans. These are the caimans. They hunt them. They are the staple diet. They feed on them every day. So that's the jaguar there. This is a hunting scene. It's jumped into the water, caught hold of this caiman, and it's feeding on it. A little down south. Any questions, guys? Anybody has a question?
Mr. Sharma, I have one question.
Please.
I felt that, and I observed that you feel that when you photograph, you try to get whatever effect that you want in your image while you shoot. So that has been my observation up till now. So you, put less emphasis on image editing. right?
Right. Sure,
So,
absolutely.
it would be nice if you can, explain a bit more, because now I know even our students, some of our students also feel that, like it's all about, image editing and stuffs like that. So
Sure,
it would be
sure.
very nice. Huh. Thank you.
Right, absolutely. So I'll tell you what my opinion is. I am a photographer who loves nature. So the word nature, natural, is very important to me. So I also have a lot of technical skills. I have an artistic vision. So I'll tell you, when I have noticed people who do digital manipulation, right? They are extremely artistic, but they use their artistry on the computer. I use my artistry on the camera. So my rule is very simple. If I can produce something on the camera, why should I produce it on the comp? If I can envision that tiger with a black background, and the camera has a spot meter and the light is conducive, all I need to do is use my skill and produce it on the camera. Anybody can produce that on Photoshop by cutting the tiger and putting it in a black background and all of that. Then the question is, the word natural for me is a little not right, but it's very subjective. These are all personal ethics. I 100% do not manipulate my images. I uh, actually, I was working in the IT industry, right? I was a user experience designer. I know Photoshop for 15, 17 years now, but I never use Photoshop for photo editing. I only use Lightroom for photo editing because I'm also a Lightroom evangelist. I believe that in the world of post processing, there are two aspects, guys. One is what we call normalization. Another is what we call manipulation. So let's quickly understand the two. I don't want to take too much time here. Because the camera is not as capable as the human eye, the camera produces pictures which are not as real as it was in front of us. So we go through a process called normalization, where we improve the contrast, improve the saturation, improve the brightness, improve the dial, blah, 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 to make that photo look the way it was in nature. After that, some people also add effects, and for example, they take this puma and put it in front of a mountain which is different. Then that is what we call as manipulation. So without actually telling people this is right or that is wrong, I just want you to know that each person has to make their own decision. And my decision for my photography was, I would not manipulate my pictures. I would only normalize my pictures. And why do I even have to normalize my pictures? Because my camera cannot produce a picture my naked eye can see, because the dynamic range issues, sensor issues, and stuff like that. So I believe if you can learn artistry, you are a photographer, right? You want to be known as a photographer. Do you want to be known as a digital artist? Then, of course, learn Photoshop, make manipulative stuff, which is not wrong at all. It's a great skill to have. Having said that, people push off digital art saying they're photographers, which is where it's a little bit of a ambiguous thing. They won't, if, for example, what do you do with that photo? You can't win an award. You can't apply there. They'll ask you for a raw file. And if the raw file shows colorful background and my photo shows black background with a tiger, will anyway not be considered, stuff like that. It's a very personal decision I made. And I only normalize my pictures because I feel good about it. When I sleep, I don't want to feel I did something that I don't want to. That's all. It's a very personal choice. I do have a lot of friends who manipulate stuff. Don't take the word manipulation in the wrong sense here. When you change things in a photo on the computer away from how it was in reality, then you manipulate. But then some will argue saying, hey, didn't you manipulate how nature was by underexposing the camera itself? It was not looking black, right? So that's a debatable topic. But I use my camera to do that creative manipulation on the field. Some people do it on the comp. I believe if you know how to do it in the camera, why will you waste your time on the computer? Because you are a nature lover, you went to the wilderness and you want to use your gadget, you want to use your camera to make images. If you can do it in front of the tiger, I feel it's a better skill to have for me. Though come back and in the lockdown sit and make black backgrounds to tigers is also a possibility. But I enjoy doing it in the field. All right, so I want to take you to one of my favorite places. Pumas are interesting, of course. I'm just skipping through so that you see some nice images. One of the places where I feel I have an edge over many Indian photographers is a place in the Arctic called Svalbard. Before we go there, let me talk about this image 1 second, please. Look at this image. I'm very proud of the composition of this image. I'll explain how I shot this image. This puma was walking, and we were carrying a tripod and a backpack and telephoto lens and walking along with the puma. And this is on a mountain, and we were panting. And I saw this puma sat in one place and looking around, and then I saw the mountain in the background. And I dropped my telephoto lens there, dropped in the sense I kept it on the floor, took my 70 to 200 lens and ran. Why did I run? I didn't run towards the puma. I ran parallelly to the puma till the time I aligned the mountain with the puma. That's when the puma turned right and saw me. And I composed this picture because I wanted the context of the mountain in the background of this puma. So this mountain, for people who know the word, is called Torres del Paine. In Spanish, it means towers of Paine. Now imagine taking a picture of a puma with the towers of Paine in the background. Now, where would you get this opportunity? And when the opportunity presented, I would have considered myself a fool if I'd not made use of it. So it took a lot of physical effort, but before physical effort, it took that spark in the head saying, hey, wahan pe mountain hai, there's a puma. You need to align yourself by moving 100 feet ahead so that the background is the mountain and not something else. So this is a very interesting composition. So this is a place called Svalbard. I'll spend 5 minutes talking about Svalbard because it's given me a lot of delight last 11, 12 years. One of the most amazing places that I have worked on. And as an Indian photographer, very few competitors to me in this part of the world because most people are in Bandhavgarh and Ranthambore. And I don't find too many people competing with me in this part of the world. When I say competing, all I mean is sharing elbow space. If everybody is producing a polar bear picture, my polar bear picture will not have value. And that brings us to another lesson we need to learn about career and business and aspect. You need to produce products that others are not producing. If a photographer is a manufacturer and a photo is a product, if you produce what everybody is producing, there's no demand for your product. If you produce something that nobody else is producing, then you have a unique USP. So for me, the USP is all these exotic locations across the globe because very few people from this part of the world go and work there. Polar bears are my favorite animals. And this is the way we go out and take pictures in the polar bear country. It's called a Zodiac. It's a rubber boat. We travel in a ship. When we see something interesting, we take a crane and we get down to the sea. We sit in this rubber boat and travel and, take pictures of animals like this. These two polar bears are fighting on sea ice. 1.5 kilometers deep is the water here. And they're on the ice or the sea. And they're fighting. And we are in the boat. And this is a handheld picture using a telephoto lens. This is a 300 millimeter lens. This is a 600 millimeter lens. Interesting to note, very similar action, but I have used two different lenses which were on two different bodies. I took this picture and I realized the landscape is so beautiful. I kept the 800 millimeter down, picked up the 300 millimeter and snapped this picture 2-3 seconds later. So these are two different pictures, not the same picture cropped out. So I love to shoot animals in their habitat because look at this photo. This is one of my most famous photographs. Polar bear on the sea ice in the Arctic. And while I have the capability to shoot an 800 millimeter picture using my 800 millimeter lens, the same trip, the same day, I have the acumen to use a 8 fisheye lens also. So as a photographer, I do not say wildlife ke liye I need a long lens. Landscape ke liye I need a wide angle lens. I have all the lenses. Many of my clients ask me, sir, to go to this place, kaun sa equipment chahiye? I say, please bring your longest lens, bring your widest lens, and everything in between. मुझे नहीं पता क्या चाहिए होगा. We'll suddenly need to photograph a landscape with a polar bear. We'll suddenly need to photograph a close-up of a polar bear. So be prepared for everything. It's a shame that you have a 24-70 lens, but वो कोलकाता में dehumidifier में या फिर cabinet में, dry cabinet में safe है. And you are in the Arctic in the cold, shivering, and you think, "Arey, my 24-70 leke aata to it would have been great." So I do not, worry about excess luggage. I want everything at my disposal. If I want to use a wide angle, I want to use a wide angle. If I want to use a telephoto, I don't want to go back thinking, "Arey yaar, I wish I had got that." Especially after having that lens sitting in Bangalore, I don't want to think like that. So I take everything I can to the field. This is a 24-70 shot of the same polar bear. This is a fisheye. This is a rectilinear shot. So I do know that we have 10 more minutes. I mean, if you sit with me, I can show you pictures for a lifetime. I will skip some of the pictures. What I want to talk about is take some questions and probably discuss some aspects of the career of photography. Let me see if there are any more questions. Again, it's Indrakshi Saha. Can you repeat which focus mode and area shall one use in Sony to capture those photographs? The ones with the natural ring light. So talking about the rim light, Indrakshi, it's nothing to do with the focus mode. The rim light has to do with the metering mode. So there's a difference. Focusing measures the distance of the subject. Metering measures the light on the scene. So I do have, if some of you are connected on Instagram to me, I do have a very extensive Instagram IGTV video on using the Sony camera. I would request you to go and check that. It's an hour-long video with a lot of ideas on different metering modes, different autofocus points, and stuff like that. I need a lot more time, Indrakshi, to explain that, and I don't want to use this session to treat it like a tutorial or a class. I just wanted to inspire you to show you some creative images. How easy or challenging to change the camera settings according to the situation in wildlife? You know, Rahul Banik, it's like asking Sachin Tendulkar, hey, Sachin, how easy is it for you to hit a pull shot, next ball a drive, the next ball a hook shot, and the next ball straight down the, long on. It's just that practice makes you get these skills and it becomes second nature. If the ball is outside the stump, you know you have to drive. If the ball is on your legs, you know you have to flick towards the leg side. If the ball is a bouncer, you know you have to get it to the boundary over the third man. If the ball is straight, it's a Yorker, you know how to defend it. So if you have all these skills in the game in your armory, without your knowledge, it becomes second nature to you that when you have a Yorker, you will defend, or you'll flick it down the leg side. When you know all these skills, you don't have to make a decision by using your brain. It will become second nature to you. It will become subconscious decision that you make, but you need to practice these consciously, saying, rim light hai to main ye karunga so that wo aayega. If you think about this, your mind inside somewhere will store that intelligence. And on the field, when that light happens, mind will use that and say, hey, Rahul, do you remember that day you had told me that ye light mein ye kar sakte hai? Why don't you try that? Karke mind will give you an idea. Heart will give you an idea. But for that, you have to control your excitement. You have to be rational, not be super excited. Tiger, they shoot karte rehte kuch log. They will never make a creative shot because they are grabbing. You remember this cliche, don't take a photo, make a photo. Uska matlab yahi hai. When there is an opportunity, you pause for a bit, take a deep breath. Okay, boss, tiger is walking towards me. Light is from there. Kya karu main? Should I make a rim light shot? Should I make a spot metered black background shot? Or it's just a normal light, I just have to make a head-on shot. If you think, you will get creative ideas. Most people don't think. They'll pick the camera, head-on, karke lifelong, they're shooting head-on shots of tigers, which is okay, but then there's only a limited amount of head-on shots that you can shoot. You're not responsible to shoot passport photographs of all the tigers in the world. All right, so where were you positioned when you clicked the photograph of the fisheye lens? So I was on a ship, Indrakshi. I was standing, remember Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic with Kate Winslet? Instead of Kate Winslet, I had a fisheye lens. So I was standing in that position and the polar bear was walking in front of me and I was taking a picture like this. Because it's a fisheye lens, if you bend it like this, it will make the horizon tilted and curved like that. If you use a fisheye lens like this, it will make the horizon curved like this. Thank you for asking. Okay, while technical questions will go on, I would love to know if anybody has questions on career aspect of wildlife photography. If you don't, if you want to continue asking creative questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise,
Mr. Sharma, on behalf of the student, I would love to hear something about the career aspect. Because I have heard from a lot of wildlife photographers who say that wildlife is a very interesting field, but it is very difficult to make a career, a profession out of it. And it's also a very expensive. It's also a very expensive vocation because all the trips and that. So I think it would be lovely if you can speak something, a little bit about the career of. Thank you, sir.
Sure, absolutely, no problem. So that is an absolute truth that you've heard. I had a statistics that I was sitting on for a long time. About 98% of photographers are hobby photographers. About 2% of the photographers are professionals. So let's first understand, what is a career? A career is something you do in order to make a living. Who is a professional? It's a very vague definition. A professional, the problem with photography is a good photographer need not be a professional, and a professional photographer need not be good, right? I mean, you could be an exceptionally great wildlife photographer, award-winning photographer, but you might not have earned 50 paisa in your life. So When you say you're a professional wildlife photographer, you mean that you make a living depending on your trade craft, which is wildlife photography. Honestly speaking, let's understand, where do wildlife photographers work? So if you go to naukri.com and search wildlife photography jobs, you'll find zero, because there is no such opening in this country or in this world for that matter. Most wildlife photographers are self-employed. And what they do is they are also a lot of people who are not professionals, like they're doctors, they're software engineers, they're businessmen, they're real estate barons and stuff like that. They have the money to buy the telephoto lens, go to the Arctic, go to, Bandhavgarh and full days and all of that. Because of that, what has happened is there is a huge supply, whereas the demand is very little. Now, if you go to a magazine, let's take an example of a magazine like Sanctuary Asia magazine or your Kolkata-based Save Us magazine. Now, how do the magazines make money? They sell a magazine and they make money. The point is, magazines itself are a dying line of business. People are very happy to read blogs and e-journals and stuff like that. How many of us are really turning magazines nowadays? Very few. So when they are not actually making money, they cannot pay people money. And also because there's a huge supply of photographs. All they have to do is contact an IT guy who has been to Bandhavgarh and say, hey, Rahul, we want your pictures from Bandhavgarh. All you have to say is excellent pictures, Rahul, and he's already ready to give you images. And if you say, I need your pictures for the magazine, I'm writing an article on the tigers of Bandhavgarh, and I'll put your name and give you credits, Rahul will be more than happy to give his images. I did the same when I was in IT and I got my picture on the Sanctuary cover. Sanctuary, being a not so great paying master, gave me 2,000 rupees for the cover page of the magazine. Now, that is true that wildlife photographers do not really make money selling photographs. My secret has been this. I recommend people who want to make wildlife photography a career that you have to sell what sells. So what I figured was selling in this world was people wanting to learn photography. So I sold my skills of teaching photography. I don't sell photographs. So when I did that, I started developing a business and an entrepreneur style of operation. I had a company, I had people signing up, because I realized people, 50 years ago, 30, 25 years ago, you would walk into a wildlife exhibition and see an amazing elephant from Corbett and say, wow, beautiful image. It costs 800 rupees. I would love to buy that for my living room. But today people go to an exhibition like that and say, wow, beautiful photograph of a Corbett Tusker. They might have two questions. Sir, आप कौन सा lens use किया? या फिर, how do I click a picture like that? People do not want to take that frame to their house. They want to take the skill of how to shoot that image or knowledge of where did they shoot that, and then they want to go and make their own images. So wildlife photography in general is not a great career option if it comes to just clicking pictures to make money. Having said that, you have a lot of associated things that you can do in order to make a living out of it, like I am doing. I run a business into wildlife photography instruction, tours, tourism-based activities and stuff like that. To make my business successful, I do need to be a good photographer. At the same time, I don't need to stand on MG Road in Bangalore saying Tusker from Corbett, 6,000 rupees, Tusker from Bandhavgarh or whatever, 4,000 rupees. I don't need to do that to sell because there's nobody who will buy. Having said that, some people do work full-time in the field of filmmaking, in the field of producing work for NGOs or for books and stuff like that. But the monies that they make there are very, very less, and they are project-based monies. It's not a secure job. They will say, we have X lakh rupees to go and do this project in Annamalai Tiger Reserve for you to document the elephant conflict. So you can spend 6 months there. You make pictures there. But one truth you have to understand is these are not creative pictures. They are not rim light images. They are not slow shutter speed motion blurs and stuff like that. These are images which are for a conservation story, which are required to write a story about Annamalai Tiger Reserve animal-human conflict, which might not excite everybody. It doesn't excite me for sure, because if I can't use my creativity to make pictures, I would not be happy to do what I'm doing. So very tough to do wildlife photography. I do not see too many options to make money apart from teaching, or if you make a name, if you become reasonably popular, you can sell fine art prints. Remember, guys, do not sell photos, sell time. Most professionals in this world are making money by selling their time. If you say, I have shot this tiger image, please buy, it's like those salesmen who come to your house with 2 soaps or 2 detergents or Eureka Forbes washing, what is it called, vacuum cleaner, and say, we have a vacuum cleaner, will you buy? And then some people may say, nahi, nahi, jao, jao, jao. Likewise, for a photographer, I feel, do not sell what you've already created. You need to figure out a way that you will sell your time, which means you could go to a publisher, you could go to an NGO, you could go to some project and say, I will give you my time for money, and whatever produce I make, whatever photos I produce are for this project. Then there is an opportunity. Most people produce photos and they're trying to find how to sell. If you go to stock websites and upload photos, 300 rupees, 400 rupees, it will sell, because that's the cost of a stock photograph. And the idea there is to produce pictures which hundreds of people will download, not really money making at all. Debanjan, it's very little time to do tutorial style talks. I do have a lot of short courses on my website if somebody wants to learn birds in flight. But in short, I must tell you, you need to have continuous focusing. You need to make sure you have the right autofocus area enabled, hopefully be on aperture priority, because you don't want to waste time setting exposure while a bird is changing its background all the time by flying. A few skills required, easier said than done. It's an acquired skill. There is a theory to it, but then practice is also very important. Using the right autofocus points, some tricks like using back button focusing, using the right metering, so many such things are involved in making technically brilliant photographs. Any other career related questions? Because I'm sure as students who are studying media, who are studying fine arts, you would like to know whether you can be a wildlife photographer. I tell this to my students that, guys, if I had an opportunity today to stand in front of a polar bear and shoot images versus, do workshops, what do you think you would want to do? Of course, want to be in front of polar bears all the time. But because there's no such project that will allow you to do so much of work, very few people in this world have a full-time job of spending time in, Arctic or in Africa or wherever they're working on, even that for a season. They'll work for 6 months and then 2 years they don't have work, because that's the freelance style of work. Everybody says, I want to work for National Geographic. You have to understand, National Geographic doesn't hire you on a payroll. They commission work to you. So they might tell you, hey, Indrakshi, I want you to take pictures of the Durga Puja in Kolkata, and we'll give you this much budget. You spend 3 months there before and after and idols and all of that. After that, the project is done. Then what Indrakshi can do there is saying, have worked with National Geographic in her profile for life, but then she'll not get paid for life. It's just for those few days, freelance style of operations. In wildlife photography, at least, I'm sure it is with many different style of photography as well. Fine art images, that's where I make a little bit of money, apart from the money I make in my company. 4 o'clock, 5 minutes. I'm happy to stay back and answer questions. I don't know what's your schedule like. So let me know. I will, from now onwards, I'll answer questions.
As because like when a student reaches his or her final year, or maybe in the second year, they want to pursue an internship in the field like which they want to get attached. So most some students really, they want to go ahead and find internships in terms of photography, but it's very difficult. So if you can share few ways or avenues through which they can grab hold of such kind of internships.
Right. So nowadays there are a lot of filmmakers doing projects in India. A lot of budget. There's all these OTT platforms. There's tons of films that are getting made. So one of the ways is to contact a filmmaker and spend 6 months doing odd jobs in the project. Odd jobs meaning, I know interns whose job will be to download the video and keyword it, tag it, and name it, label it, and do that for 6 months. But in those 6 months, they'll be in an environment where they'll learn and hear stuff they would never do that in an academic environment, because this is a real life project. So that is why it makes sense to spend those time where you go and work for somebody. Like I have a lot of interns who work in my company. I have interns who would probably do work in video production, like Adobe Premiere Pro. I definitely need interns for that. I do need interns who work on Lightroom and can produce fine art images. I have a clientele which is 5,000 people strong. A lot of rich people who love to go to the forest and click, but they don't know how to use software. So I do have requirement of people who will give raw files, and I want people to process them for these customers. So likewise, there will be a lot of internships, but not an internship where I'll say, oh, okay, Debanjan, you are my intern. Next month we are going to Arctic. Come, let's go. It's never going to happen because let's be fair enough. It costs a lot of money, and going there is also a part of the perk for a photographer. So it's very difficult to get such projects. Having said that, you should keep an eye out. Definitely, there'll be somebody who needs an assistant to do help in the field. Filmmaking is probably a good idea for media people to go and get some internships. Otherwise, contact me if you want to be an intern after you're graduated. Toehold is hopefully going to survive the COVID crisis, and we'll have some work where we'll be able to accept some interns as well.
Exactly. Well said, Mr. Sharma. Like they have to be in that situation, in that ecosystem, like where they can learn. They have to invest time. Even in filmmaking, like students go and be an observer. Okay, they spend years, months to know the art.
See, unless somebody is a rich kid, you definitely need to go and spend that time doing odd jobs, because how will you get a job to run a camera or a telephoto lens or go to the field? How would they trust a person like you? Only when you're staying there and being there and helping that project, and then slowly gaining trust with the photographer or the person who's doing the project, and then hope for that day when somebody falls ill and then there is a need, and that's how all these cricketers have got a break, right? When Sehwag is unwell, only somebody got a break. So you need to be there in the team as an extra. Take water bottle to the batsman for a long time before the batsman falls ill and you get a chance. So you definitely need to wait for that opportunity.
That's happened for Farah Khan as well. Like Saroj Khan was the choreographer and Farah Khan took over the challenges like one certain day. So it's similar to every industry. So you have to invest time. Right. So I'm sure like after they graduate, a lot of students will want to get associated with you as well.
Yeah. I want to tell you something just on that note. I have 4 camera delivery boys in Toehold because we have the camera delivery setup, right? Today, I just have to call the boys and tell them, I want you to set the camera to aperture priority, change the metering to spot metering, make sure the autofocus is on continuous focus, and make sure it's on high speed, auto drive, and they know how to do that. And what is their job? They are camera delivery boys. Just by being in the environment, they learn over time. So they didn't go to school and learn photography. So you're absolutely right.
Exactly. So I'm sure like this session will not end within this time frame, but we have certain challenges, so we have to go ahead. And I'm sure like a lot of students and the iLEAD family wants to get associated with you for future projects as a mentor, okay, as an advisor. So there are a few questions. I mean to say few things are coming up from the students as well. Thank you, sir. It's from Debanjan. Sure. I would like to be your student. Okay. So definitely you can get in touch with sir. That will not be a problem. And in fact, I'm sure like if the students wants to get connected with you through social media or personally after they graduate, I think like they can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the time this is the time you should go ahead, invest time, learning, making good connections, because connections is one thing like that will give you what you really want in your future.
True.
Sabyasachi sir, yes. Would you like to say something?
Well, I would really, thank you, Mr. Sharma, for this wonderful presentation. There was one topic which I had thought of, but I don't think time is there. But since you, because this was one area which I felt if time permit, I know time is not there because you have spoken so much about photography as an art, as you have emphasized so much on the artistic thing. And if I am not wrong, you have a distinction from Royal Photographic Society. If I was going just correct. Before so maybe I don't know whether it's enough of time to talk a bit about this or not, because I think this is an area where I don't think our students are much exposed to.
Sure. Sure.
I don't. Yeah.
So there are a lot of these salons, which accept your work, and there'll be a panel of judges who will sit and review your work, and they will give you a distinction. So I'm an associate of the Royal Photographic Society, London, where you have to submit your work, and there'll be a panel of judges who will recognize and say, okay, he's an associate of the club. Likewise, in India, we have something called as FIP, which is Federation of Indian Photography. A couple of people from Bihar are heading this right now. I would like all you students to follow some of these salons. Federation of Indian Photography is a good place to start, where you'll have these workshops, this academic environment, and where you'll be able to submit photographs, get critique, learn from elders who have done this for a while, and be in an environment where learning happens through peers. You know what? I must tell you guys, even though I have done over 100 workshops and my company has taught over 10,000 people, each workshop, the person who learns the most is me. And because I learn not from better photographers, I learn from students as well. When students ask me a question, I learn something because, I get an idea. Next time I can implement that. So it's very important to be academically a magnet where you can suck knowledge from every source. So when you are in a platform like that, salons, they not only allow you to submit images and give you feedback, but also by watching two people converse in photography, you'll learn a lot. That's what happens on my tours. People will always learn stuff not from the mentor, but also from peers. That's an important way to learn as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you.
I'm sure like this conversation and session gave all of us the raw view or the raw image before stepping into the final profession. So we are very glad to have you, and we wish we want to get associated with you as well as I think the students are more than excited to be associated with you. So from iLEAD, I would like to thank you once again for joining us on this webinar.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. So here we end the session, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.